Good morning, class. This is Jacob Walters, and today is February 21st, and this is our fifth or sixth um, video presentation. So today, as I said, is February 21st, and it is exactly 17 years and 1 month since the New York Times headline read, "President Bush orders start of war in Iraq, missiles apparently miss Hussein." The war in Iraq would end up being one of the most successful ground invasions in modern history, lasting only about 20 days or so, depending on what account you read. The United States sustained few casualties and completely routed the Iraqi ground forces and destroyed the Iraqi Air Force. This was only the beginning of a long and complicated war. The 2003 invasion of Iraq proved to be much more complicated than the Bush administration thought that it would be. By 2005, it seemed that the entire operation was in danger of spiraling out of control, and in many ways that is exactly what happened. It quickly became apparent that the social and governmental structure that had been hidden beneath the Saddam regime was not capable of coalescing on its own into anything remotely resembling stability. Sunni, Shiite, and Kurdish communities became polarized, and violence began to take root when al-Qaeda saw an opportunity for a foothold and took it. Excuse me. American leaders were forced to either abandon Iraq to the forces of terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism, or to dig in and figure out how to nation build in the midst of a violent and complicated insurgency. What is interesting is that it does not seem as though the administration was even aware that this was a possibility. From a citizen's perspective, the situation in Iraq seemed to be a shock after the initial success of the invasion, followed by triumphant images of delighted Iraqi citizens toppling the statue of Saddam Hussein in Frito Square. Had the administration spent a little time talking to regional experts, however, they probably could have been better prepared for the chaos that followed. In an article written in 1998 for the New York Times, author and global politics expert Robert D. Kaplan correctly predicted how the events in Iraq might play out if Saddam were to be suddenly removed by an American intervention. In the article, Kaplan predicted that the Saddam regime had effectively destroyed the fabric of Iraqi communities, businesses, and the kinds of relationships that make for a functioning society. Another article by Brian Whitaker and published in The Guardian expresses similar questions right before the invasion in 2003. Whitaker identifies the very real problem of finding a suitable successor and, more importantly, of making sure that the wrong people are somehow kept out. His exact words were that unless care is taken, the new cabinet could turn out to be a collection of war criminals. Before a new cabinet could even be considered, however, all of the wrong people seemed to flood into the country or crawl out of hiding, depending on where they came from, making even the selection of a new leader or cabinet a near impossibility for nearly 2 years. These articles would make excellent material for either a written or a discussion assignment in a modern history class or in an American military history class. The words of both Kaplan and Whitaker proved to be ominous, and the benefit of hindsight makes these two articles useful reading for the classroom. There are several ways that they could be analyzed. The way that I would suggest for a classroom would be to pose theories about why, given the information that was available about the political and cultural situation in Iraq, was the U.S. government not better prepared? I would suggest possibly finding other articles in more conservative papers, such as the Washington Post, which took a different approach to the situation and tended to stress the villainy of Hussein and the possibility of weapons of mass destruction. The Post and the Times do tend to stress different values, and so in this situation they tend to publish articles which reflect this, which can give a historian excellent perspective on public opinion concerning Iraq at the time, which helps to explain the decisions that were made. So in essence, taking articles from a more liberal paper and articles from a more Republican paper, and then applying them to the situation in 2005 when things began to deteriorate in Iraq, could not only help students to understand why the situation in Iraq deteriorated, but what the political forces were that were behind President Bush's actions. Anyway, I hope this gave you some food for thought, and I hope you all have a good week.